Haha, fooled you. This is not an Apocalypse review. This video is actually several minutes of me doing impressions of my favorite sound effects from the 90s X-Men cartoon series. Ready? Here we go. Bing-a-ding-a-now, now, now. Bing-a-ding-a-now, now, now. I'm kidding. I'm not actually gonna do that. Or am I? X-Men Apocalypse from 20th Century Fox is the third installment in the kind of new school rebooted X-Men franchise. For 90s kids like me, a chance to see Apocalypse brought to life on the big screen along with all these other X-Men characters is a dream come true. But is it any good? Early reviews on this movie were surprisingly negative, which is kind of strange considering Bryan Singer has a pretty solid track record as a great director. So despite some of the negativity and bad reviews that this movie's getting, I personally actually really enjoyed it. Though it's definitely a solid addition to the X-Men franchise, it does have a few elements that don't quite live up to the potential that they could have had. And unfortunately, the first of said issues is actually the main villain of the movie, Apocalypse himself. The character Apocalypse from the X-Men comic books is a towering menace of a villain, the very first mutant ever born, and most importantly, he believes that only the strong deserve to survive. So in the movie, Apocalypse wakes up after being asleep for like millennia. He kind of looks around at the way the world is and how civilization has developed, and he's pretty much disgusted. He feels like the governments of the world and the laws that we've created are coddling and pandering to the weak, and that the best thing to do is to just wipe the slate clean and start over. And whereas Apocalypse believes that the strong should rule over and eliminate the weak, Professor Xavier literally says those who have power should protect those who don't. But while Apocalypse is a major villain from the comic books and could have been an incredible presence on screen, he never quite reaches that level of like ultra boss villain that you kind of want him to. I ended up feeling the same way about Apocalypse that I did about Ultron from the second Avengers movie. With a dream casting of the perfect actor and the right CGI special effects behind him, we've got all the makings of what could be a fantastic villain on screen. But they just don't make it because they don't really do anything. I spent the whole movie waiting for Apocalypse to do something like epic and terrifying, and instead he spends the whole movie kind of getting ready to do something. In terms of story, the movie was interesting and it definitely held my attention, but I wouldn't necessarily call it gripping. Like I wasn't like on the edge of my seat waiting to see what happened next. The pacing of the movie was also a little bit slow in places, or there were a couple of scenes that maybe went on for a little longer than they really needed to, or certain things that just kind of didn't make a whole lot of sense. Like, wait, if he can just vaporize people whenever he wants to, then why is he wasting his time fighting the X-Men at all? Or towards the end of the movie when you're like, wait, Magneto's doing what now? Like, what's he doing? About halfway through, there's a scene in the movie where Apocalypse telepathically hijacks all of the nuclear missiles in the world. Let me say that again. Apocalypse takes control of every single nuclear missile on planet Earth and fires them all at once. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, that's awesome, that's incredible, finally, here we go. But instead of them hitting anything, he kind of just like fires them into space and like gets rid of them. And you're like, wait, why, what? Huh? The X-Men mythology is all about the strength of the characters, and this movie did pretty well with that. The characters were believable and likable and all pretty much did a good job with what they were given, though some people weren't really given a whole lot to do, which I'll get to in a second. We had some new faces playing younger versions of familiar characters, and I wasn't really sure how well that was gonna work, but I actually really liked it. New versions of Cyclops, Nightcrawler, and Jean Grey, played by Sansa Stark, all did a really good job. Once again, James McAvoy does a fantastic job as Professor X, and he actually had some really funny moments in the movie. Jennifer Lawrence returning as Mystique is okay. But the character that you're most emotionally attached to by far is Magneto. Seriously, how outstanding is Michael Fassbender as Magneto in these X-Men movies? I just love what they've done with this character, and Michael Fassbender just knocks it out of the park every single time. But this time, he just kills it because you really feel for this guy. You really sympathize with this character, especially some of the stuff that he goes through in this movie is just like, oh. The last thing I gotta mention are the characters in this movie that just never got to live up to the potential they had, mainly because they didn't have a whole lot to do. The four horsemen of the apocalypse in this movie were so cool, but I was disappointed with how little they actually got to do. Archangel was just kind of there. Storm was probably the character they spent the most time with, and I already like Alexandra Shipp as this character way more than I ever liked Halle Berry. But I gotta say, the new character that I was most excited about seeing was Psylocke. Like most straight guys who grew up reading comics, I've been a massive fan of the character ever since way back in the good old days of the X-Men comics from the 90s. And Psylocke in this film looks fantastic. Played by Olivia Munn, she just absolutely embodies that character from the time that she first came onto the screen. And every scene that she was in, I was just like, oh my gosh, she looks so cool. But she didn't do anything. And it was the same with the other horsemen. They basically just stood around looking really cool the whole movie. So I feel like this movie really could have benefited from a scene about halfway through where the four horsemen just get to like demolish a city or like fight an army or just something where they just got to be awesome. We never really got that. Lastly, the ending of the movie was a little bit weak. Again, no spoilers, but let's just say the showdown with Apocalypse at the end didn't quite have the punch that I wanted it to. What I really wanted out of the ending of this movie was for like the horsemen to come to their senses and have like everybody in the movie versus Apocalypse. That doesn't happen. So the ending was a little bit meh, although the very last scene in the movie was awesome. I was like jumping up and down in my chair for the very, very last frame of this movie. So to wrap this up, X-Men Apocalypse is a fun and entertaining return back to the X-Men mythology. It's a good movie, but it's definitely not as strong as Days of Future Past or First Class. The movie has a few elements that have great potential that never really pay off the way you want them to. But if you're a casual moviegoer, you can still just kind of enjoy it for what it is. Honestly, the biggest mistake that this movie made was coming out right after Captain America Civil War. We're just so spoiled these days with these movies. Ultimately, I think it's people's expectations for this film that are really kind of sabotaging it. So if you're a fan of the X-Men cartoon or the comic books like I am, and you've got really, really high hopes for this movie, lower your expectations a little bit, and I think you'll be okay. Final verdict, I'm gonna give X-Men Apocalypse a 7 out of 10. It's a good movie, it's fun to watch, could have been better, but you should still go see it if you like this kind of stuff. Thanks as always for watching. If you liked the video, make sure you click the thumbs up button for me, subscribe to my channel, and send the link to a few friends that you think will appreciate it. And make sure you keep checking in because there's a lot of crazy cool stuff on the way, so stay tuned. Thanks again for watching. I'm Gary Mitchell, and I'm gonna send you out with my X-Men cartoon sound. Scott! Jean! Winds! Aid my hands! No problem, Cher. Anytime, sugar. Scott! Jean! I'm sorry. Okay, that's enough. Bing-a-ding-a-now, now, now. Bang-a-now!